Great. Hello, good morning, everyone. Very nice to see you here, and I hope we will have a very interactive session. My name is Virginie Gillet. I'm a land and water officer from FAO, and we have organized this session together with Imi, and Chiara Colombo will arrive in a second. She's trying to get more people to join our dialogue. And we have the great help of Marta.
Hello everyone, my name is Marta. I'm the Global Advocacy Lead of the World Youth Parliament for Water. I coordinate advocacy as well for the Global Youth Movement for Water I helped establish, which is a coalition of 380 youth-led organizations in the water sector. And I'm here invited as an ambassador of the 1 Million Youth Action Challenge initiative. That was a project initiated by Switzerland and catalyzed by the International Secretariat for Water, in which we provide seed funding for youth-led projects in different areas related to water, but also climate. Very, very happy to see you all here, and I hope that we get very fruitful discussions and hopefully some hard questions answered as well.
Great, thank you. You were good to do it yourself. I could not say all this. Great, thank you. Thank you. So just maybe a bit of a short background on this water resilient food system. For those who were in COP28 last year, this one of the main initiative from COP28 presidency. There was a full day dedicated to water resilient food system with a high-level ministerial dialogue. And that ended up in a launch of a partnership, working with the different institutions that we have mentioned, but a lot other that are not here today physically, but are participating, like NDC partnership, World Bank, IFAD, GRP. So there's a number of those institutions. And just this morning, we had a very nice discussion with country, consultation with them to understand how best this partnership can help support the country to bring water and agriculture more into their strategy, policy, make sure that we are transitioning toward a more resilient food system. So that's the background of this session here. But because we had the closed meeting with the country right before, we also wanted to hear diversity of perspective, and that's why you are all here, basically. We wanted to take into account also what we should do better in that partnership to make that transition really happening in the country toward more resilient food system. And yeah, we're now all ears. We really want to hear from you, and that's the idea a bit of that dialogue. We have invited humanitarian sector, private sector, a lot of youth, and academics. So we're really keen to understand what this resilient food system looks like for you, what they should look like if that's not correct at the moment, and which objective we should try to focus our work towards. So that's a bit the background of this. So there is not a good answer. You will be asked to contribute a lot. It's a very interactive session. There is not a single good answer. We want to hear all the different answers, and we will try to reflect that as much as possible in our work also. So that's, I think, the background. So I think we can start immediately with a Mentimeter. If that is, oh yes. So no, but I think it should work, the Mentimeter. Look, we have the Mentimeter starting. You can use the code that is indicated here. Sorry. So it's or the QR code, or if you're putting in the code directly, it's 51 0.08548. So the idea behind this Mentimeter is to understand what is your water story, water and food story. What, in one word, you can tell us about it. And just an idea that we will probably ask you to comment on that word later on. We will take the time to go into a few of the different answers to understand more what is behind that word, what is the real story, the full story behind that word. So we start to see a few nice, interesting. Should I give you the floor?
Also, for the new people who are in the back, please feel free to come. Please feel free to sit. If you don't have a seat here, I will find you one. Okay? Good. The beauty about this and why we are actually doing this Mentimeter is because right now we have more and more water at the space of climate. Finally, after many, many years, we finally have water integrated. However, water comes in very different shapes and forms. And one of the big impacts is the nexus of water and food systems. And that we are starting to explore even more now. In different organizations, different institutions, we have bilateral meetings, we have, again, consultations. And this is why it's so important to have your personal stories, to know a little bit how you relate to water, how you relate to this sector, and eventually how we can bring this sector to you as well. And thank you so much for taking the time of being here again. Okay, let's see, Virginie, what do you think? What do we have?
We have a lot of interesting. There is one that catch my eyes immediately because I don't know what that means immediately, which is the GHG. So I will come to that person. But then this 55,000 years water knowledge is also very catchy. So can I ask who wrote that and to tell us a bit more about that story? Ah, great.
I wrote the 65,000 years worth of water knowledge. So it's from an Australian context. Australia has one of the oldest living cultures on the planet. It's the driest inhabited continent on Earth, and I suppose it's that knowledge and connection and understanding and observation, testing, retesting, the science of survival for Aboriginal people on Australia is a key part of what I do. And so I suppose I deal with water, so I've been dealing with water for a long time. And so I suppose but the challenge is that we rarely have the opportunities to have a voice. We rarely have opportunities to be part of decision making. And so I suppose I'm providing evidence for my people to actually influence. So I'm providing science, in a Western world,
Thank you so much, and I think I'm very happy to have you as a panelist here today because your knowledge and the knowledge that you're vehiculating through what you're going to be sharing with us today is going to be massive, and I think it's very important to note in today's state of affairs. Okay, do we have who wrote GHG? Who wrote GHG? Because we don't know exactly what that means. Yes.
So greenhouse gas emissions. So I also put in the center climate here because it's why we are here, and really to have not really a single benefit, just using less water, but it's really essential using less water. On the one hand, really to have enough water for humans, but on the other hand, really to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
That's why we're here, right? To have and continue these conversations. And another point that I really it catches my eye is nature is water and water is life. This is something that we have been repeating in this pavilion forever. So please, if you do LinkedIn posts, write it. Water is a lot of positive connotations. Water can be a source of joy, a source of community interactions. It can be a source for us to share together across countries and cooperate. But it can also be a deadly tool. We have seen the floods. We have seen agricultural crops getting flooded. We have seen people having less and less water or more dirty water to get to their fields and not be able to sustain life. So again, water can have this dichotomous approach, and this is why we need also your stories a little bit to know how you relate to water and how you perceive water sources and what kind of personality you give to the water that surrounds you. Maybe we can go to the next section, if that's okay. Because we have another question at the Mentimeter, so please take your phones again. And I think this is the core of today's talk. We need to know for you what you perceive could be done best, or you should know more in order to bring water to the agricultural debate. I know that you all come from different countries, you all come from different sectors, and that's the power of this panel today. We need to know what should we be discussing about? What should be the points we need to be raising when we have the possibility of raising those in these discussions, in these spaces, and when we go back home? I'll give you 1 minute, and you can submit as many points as you want.
Enough seats. I see some people still typing. There will be also an opportunity to type later on as this discussion advances. Without water, you die? Yes. Yes. That's a very powerful statement. We could ask, why do you die if you don't have water? And who dies when we don't have water? I think that's also an important question. And this is what we have representatives of a lot of sectors with us today. So please, I would like to invite all the panelists who are invited to share their experiences with us today to come on stage. We're not going to be directly answering these questions. We're going to having you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your background, and also tell us a little bit more about intergenerational perspectives that you can bring and potential questions that you might also have. So since it's very interactive, I will ask you to introduce yourself directly, actually.
Yama, Brad Mogridge, Kamilaroi man from New South Wales in Australia. It's sort of, if you know Australia's east coast, Brisbane, and you go about 500 kilometres inland, and that's sort of my traditional lands. I live in Canberra, which is Australia's capital. I'm currently a professor of science at University of Technology in Sydney, and my area is Indigenous knowledge and water.
Thank you. So I'm Daniel from Bayer. I'm leading the corporate climate strategy, which means all the topics regarding decarbonization.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Margot from Action Against Hunger. So I represent a humanitarian NGO working across 55 countries. And I'm WASH officer, so on water, sanitation and hygiene. And I will talk more in detail about the link between water and our mandate that is fighting undernutrition and malnutrition.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sohaila, and I am from the U.S. I work with hospital systems, specifically on decarbonizing their food systems and partnering them up with small farms to ensure that their food systems are more water resilient and also less greenhouse gas emissions, what we talked about earlier. So excited to talk about that.
Hi, apologies for my voice today. I'm Karina. I'm from Panama. For the Panamanian delegation as part of the Young Negotiator Academy program. And also I'm a lecturer and researcher in a local state university in topics of climate vulnerability and water security.
So, thank you, everyone. My name is Tish, like a fish, and I'm a proud Kukulug woman from Kukugal Nation from the island of Masig in Senedithkes. We're part of the Island First Nations group in Australia, as well as with Brad. We're located between Papua New Guinea and mainland Australia, so it's part of also the Melanesian part of the Pacific. I'm here for two lenses, I guess, on climate, as my community in a developed nation is finding it hard for water accessibility, as well as on my philanthropy side, there is a gap of redistributing wealth back into small-scale food systems that are really pivotal to regenerate back into sort of what Brad had mentioned, our really dry, rugged country. And so that's me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Doreen Michael and I'm from We Are Family Foundation. Originally I come from Tanzania and I work as a climate tech advocate, youth advocate, where I work at the intersection of empowering coastal women in using digital tools to empower themselves, but also restoration activities along the coastal communities of East Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Wait.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pedro Zorrilla. I'm working in Greenpeace, Spain. I'm here with the Greenpeace International Delegation. And I can share my experience in Spain with water management. Spain is it's a dry country. We have many issues. We are, as in everywhere, very dependent on water. So I can share some thoughts on that.
And now for the last one. Please do introduce yourself and your background when it comes to water and agriculture.
Hello everyone, my name is Maweje Herbert, and I think I'll keep it that I'm a farmer. And I'm from Uganda, happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you here as well. So as you might have seen, we have a very complete panel. We don't have that many opportunities of having a lot of sectors represented, a lot of regions represented as well, and a lot of different backgrounds, different expertises presented. And this is why we wanted you to be able to directly ask them questions and to directly engage with all of them, because this is what we need if you want real solutions that will be long-lasting. If not, if we don't include everyone, it's going to be quite complicated getting things to last. Now, before we go back to the Mentimeter that we did before, I wanted to ask the panelists, because you did us the favor of being here in such a hectic COP, to answer one question that we thought would be useful for starting the dialogue, which is, what can each generation teach the other about sustainability from your perspective? And what you personally within your own capacities and within your own communities or within your own companies are doing to bridge these generations. And eventually what you wish the young people would do more in order to facilitate your task of including them within all the actions that you do, or facilitating their visibility within all the actions that you do. And I think we're going to start again by Pedro. Pedro, your turn.
Okay, I have the micro. Yeah.
Yes, this is Richard.
So, one thing I think water is a special issue that is very different in the different parts of the world, and even within one country can be very different from one region to another, and that changed the perspective and the solutions as well. So in my country, in Spain, I think all generations can show us how it was managed sustainably the water like many generations ago. We are lacking or we are losing this valuable knowledge because most of the current farmers are more used to more the industrial way of doing things, but still we have a lot of old generations that can share this valuable experience. With the young generations, I think we have the emphasis, like the energy of doing well things, of caring for nature and caring for the others. And so this can be a source of energy for trying to do things better. And what I'm doing to bridge these generations, that's a difficult thing. So just sharing the best knowledge we have. The scientific knowledge has to be translated into the general public, and just also teaching my children to do it in the way I think should be done, and that would be
1,000%. I think when it comes to actions, when it comes to making an influence, it's never too big, it's never too small. So starting within the families and bringing generational change, I think that's quite valuable and something that sometimes we forget to mention when we are in these big spaces at these international spheres. Let's move on.
I suppose I need to give a context about generations being engaged in this space, especially Australia is a colonised country. We're the only modern colonised country without a treaty with its First Peoples. My mum's generation wasn't counted as human until the late 1960s. So they were part of the flora and fauna for a long time. Every part of their life was controlled. So their identity was taken, their culture was taken, their knowledge was capped, and also their language was removed from their existence. And so my generation, we've sort of been trying to fight back, and then the generation next is working harder as well to bring back a lot of our language. So we have over 300 languages on mainland Australia, and Torres Strait will have more as well. We have, and yeah, a lot of those languages are vulnerable, some are threatened, and some are extinct. So some we've lost. So I suppose there's a generational aspect where the young ones now are getting access to culture that my mum's generation didn't have. So we're sort of, I'm in the middle, and my privilege, I suppose, is being educated. My role is trying to bridge. So I try and make sure when I do research, it's from an Indigenous point of view. It's an Indigenous research methodology, the way we do business, the way we tell our stories, the way we work to build knowledge, and then obviously we work ways to protect that knowledge. And then I try my best to try and bring the young ones along when the elders are talking. So the young ones are listening, and I suppose that's the thing that you might hear, is that's why you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. As a young one, you've got to do double the listening to talking. So I suppose being out on traditional lands is another important thing. So reconnecting people with their traditional lands, because where I've done my research, we've been locked out for about 150 years. And so we're reconnecting with stories, and then obviously bringing elders back, bringing the young ones with those elders, and we're reconnecting with that place to generate our stories and reconnect our language, reconnect our knowledge of place. And I think it's a really exciting space. And I suppose we can't wait around for governments to allow us to do it. We've got to do it ourselves. And I suppose, as I said, my privilege as an academic, I can do it my way. I can say what I want. I'm not bound by government. And I think it's I've got to use that for good, not evil.
Thanks, Brad. So first of all, I don't think that the young generation needs specific learning. So from my point of view, they are much more educated than I was at this time. What we can bring in is really personal experience to bring this over. And for me, it's much about consumption. So and especially in this field, water, agriculture is we need to produce more with less and restore more. And that is what I would give the young generation, as I do with my kids.
Thank you. So I would like to start from the youngest generation, babies. And I would like to start by sharing figure with you. 50% of death mortality is due to undernutrition, malnutrition. This figure is key, and when we link it to water, access to safe water is key, and so the link between food and water starts at this age. It even starts in the mother's. When it even starts with pregnant mothers. And I wanted to also share an example of actions we are developing. It's baby wash project. So it is based. I'll spare you the theory on. But we could come back to it later. And basically, we are working on this project with pregnant women, with babies, to avoid the contamination by pathogens from the environment and water as well. Also, I wanted to emphasize the fact that local actors are an integral part of the response, and just wanted to emphasize the fact that we really want to empower and see how we can empower local actors. As I said, Action Against Hunger is working across 55 countries, working with partners, with local organizations, and local actors know the best what is good for them. So I could go on the topic, but thank you.
Thank you so much. I agree with everything that's been said. I think what we're doing right now is of utmost importance, and ensuring that most spaces are what's up here, where multiple generations are represented and also multiple sectors and backgrounds, because especially now, even with our just AI and social media, algorithms are making each generation kind of in an echo chamber, and we want to make sure that moving forward, our spaces don't become sort of solely young people or solely elderly people. We don't want to end up in this echo chamber in reality as well. And I think what you were saying earlier about coming into a space and seeing what the locals are doing or what people are already doing is a very, very, very important, because I think we actually did a case study in a small town in California where we wanted to essentially analyze how wastewater was affecting the local population. And upon further research, we actually found that there were already 3 organizations of grassroots immigrants and advocates already doing what we were trying to research. So essentially became sort of a partnership instead. So just by including multiple voices, you also just prevent reinventing the wheel of things that have already been done, and you also just essentially learn from experiences that are already out there. So
Well, I have to agree with all that statement too, because I think it's key to engage and have spaces that are multi-generational, and also in terms of youth, it's key and important to understand where they're coming from, the traditions, when we arrive to a place, and even also the recognition of the territory is key to understand water patterns, climate patterns that are changing, to all the activities that are also related to food production. So that's something I emphasize a lot in the classroom. Like you cannot just arrive and propose a solution. You definitely have to understand the context, and that becomes with engaging with the community and engaging with all different actors, engaging with people from all different ages, and what we can also bring into it from the academic part is to bring also innovation and co-collaboration, co-creation of knowledge and co-creation of solutions.
Thank you. And just to add to already the incredible knowledge and perspectives, as a Torres Strait Islander, we, and I'm sure other folks sort of, have felt this and experienced this, but I started this space, and I think I come back to our first question from the Metis, was culture. It was about the traditional knowledge, because we are the ones observing our land and our waterways. And it's a part of our stories. And I know from what Brad was saying, like, these stories are also our totems. They're also our way of life. And so coming back to water is life, I wrote these words, and I want to share with you today, because we're inheriting as a younger generation these responsibilities and trying to ensure that we can continue learning this, this knowledge and adapting to these changes that are happening on our, especially on my island home. And so I want to say, dear Nuku is water. And I say, you are the oxygen that gives me life, the reason I exist. You are the sunshine in my soul, you I cannot resist. Together we have sailed amongst entitled ships and their money-hungry men. Each wave you guide me to stand up, be stronger, and be better than them. Each silence that hurts, that fills my heart with pain. Every time I touch you to heal, your spirit swims through my veins. The connection is electrifying. I constantly yearn for more, always trying to be near you on the pursuit to feel, smell you, and deep into my core. You are the medicine, the food that keeps us alive. It is why my people and communities continue and persevere to survive. Because this cloud of colonial construct and systems of unjust, the manipulation and greed through everything, I always trust. Together with the stars, the wind and the moon, we move to the beat of each other, a spiritual tune. And so I guess that was just a little bit about what that sort of really means culturally.
Thank you so much for sharing that poetry. And that actually brings us again to the fact that we can relate to food and water through art. We can bring our stories through different perspectives. Before a COP, we engaged with a lot of Azerbaijani youth through sports, through arts. And it was a good way also to bring messages and to bring this message of despair, but still hope, with a call to action that hopefully resonates in our hearts and gets us going, because we have a lot of work to do. Okay.
Thank you for the question. Now, I would love to speak on three things. One is the context of East Africa, where I come from. Second is what we are already doing as We're Family Foundation, but also what I'm personally do. Now, to start off on the matter of what each generation can teach the other, right? One thing that I've always believed, and I would love to echo what Brad had already said, is young people, the current generation, is at the heart of both culture and innovation. Like, we're at that point where we have both feet in both worlds, the culture, the indigenous and ethnic knowledge, but also we're also very active and proactive in technology and innovation. Now, what that translates to the older generation is they have the experience. And that means we can work together to exchange that, more of a partnership kind of relationship. Now, relating that to the context of East Africa, we have cases of farmers losing around 63% of the harvests. And this is because, yes, they have the knowledge that they've been using for generations. Things like crop rotation, that has been done for generations. Currently, they're calling it a new solution, but I'm like, is it really? You know, these are the stuffs that have been there for generations. Now, they've been practicing it, but why had the yields been low? Right? There's somewhere something that is missing. And that is where now young people come to play at hand. Because now the old generation already have the solution. They have the knowledge, they have the know-how. But what they're missing is now the tech part, you know? We have small farmers, they're always struggling with technological solutions, but young people have innovation that are actually very affordable, very accessible to these small-scale farmers. And now it's more a matter of how the policies, how governments are making the systems more supportive and acceptive of young people's innovation and solutions. Now, what UA Family Foundation is already doing is bringing young people to the table. We have this program called Youth to the Table, which is also where the part that brought me to COP29, where now we are making sure that young people are not just at the sideline. We're not just observing, but we're at the core and at the center of decision-making tables. We're partnering young people with big NGOs, partners, decision-making, policymakers, and challenge them to, hey, we have the solutions. Now give us the ear to listen. Because young people have always been pushing for solutions. Like, we're not just sitting and waiting for the government to decide for us. We've always been pushing, but the systems have been a bit of resistance to us. And that is what we're kind of highlighting. In terms of what I'm personally doing now in East Africa, is the same way that I've already said, young people have the solution. I work with young and women of coastal communities in restoration projects. And sometimes you might find that we had one case of people cutting mangroves for firewood. Right? We're talking about something that can help us, but when you're talking about the importance of nature, biodiversity, for them it's a foreign language because they know that nature is important, but also it's survival. And you can't blame them for wanting to survive. Now, how do we now teach them how to sustain nature while at the same time coexisting with it? Now is where we play part. We've had to use animation, which is very simple. I can't even say technology, but it's a very simple method to reach these people. Storytelling, teaching them in a way and in a language that they can understand and comprehend very well. This is just showing what young people bring to the platform, but also respecting the indigenous and ethnic knowledge. That is also showing what the older generation brings to the table. Yeah.
I think she said it very good. From my perspective as a farmer, if you say what each generation is bringing on table, I'll first give you an experience from my own farm. In the community, we have most of the individuals that have most of the land. This is they're the older generation. And per se, in times like this, when you're talking about climate change, ideally back like 2 years back, they would tell you, according to how the winds flow, whether it will rain or it will not rain. And I think that is one of the basics I learned from them, that we can actually tell. And also, depending on the intensity of the sun, whether it's going to rain or not. There is no technology attached to this. But I mean, it's the indigenous knowledge that the older generation brings into play. But still, when you talk about the young generation, now what we bring onto board is because we bring, I think it's one of the speakers that said, we bring less use of water. You know, we bring sustainable ways of how best we can use water. But we also bring more innovative ways that earlier on in the days, it was even very hard to drill water or to harvest water from underground. My grandfather used to tell me that you can only harvest rainwater, but I can still now harvest water from the ground. So I think this is what we're bringing up on board. We are bringing up innovative ways, new ways. We challenge the status quo of what used to happen, but also trying to see that we get ourselves there. I mean, this whatever is happening. Let me say, what are you doing to bridge this Is it so? About sustainability. I can't read it well. Generation take other about sustainability from your perspective. from my own perspective, from a farmer's view perspective, I'll start with, we say that water is quite a big challenge. And if I give you a personal story, even this very season, I've lost about 2.5 hectares of beans because of a lot of water. So we talk about now water scarcity. You know, water scarcity has both two ways we can look about it. We have the physical, but we also have the economical. In my own perspective, where I come from, we can't say we have the water underground, but we have the knowledge, the technical capacity, the investment, the infrastructure to be in position to harvest this water. That is also quite a problem. But we are saying it's not the end of it. We can still find finances. And that's when we come to delegations or to COP like this, when you're talking about climate financing, it becomes very passionate. Because these are the very issues that we're facing right now. We need finances to be in position to harvest the water from the underground. We need the finances to be in position to put this water now to use. But not only putting the water to use, but sustainably putting this water to use. Because we have to acknowledge water is not an unlimited resource that it used to be. It will be a time when you need this water droplet to let that plant out and you can't even find it. And this is the outcry of the young farmers that we represent, or that I represent. Maybe I didn't introduce myself well, but I come from the Young Farmers Federation, where we have over 41,000 young farmers. And our plea is, how best can we be in position to harvest the water? How can we get infrastructure to get the water? But the most important part is creating awareness. What are innovative ways that are there? How did our grandfathers do it? But maybe it cannot work in this perspective. But the good part is there are solutions. And the solutions are out here. The solutions are within the peers. And I've got to know that when young people have been invested in, they really bring solutions to the table. Everything that we're talking about rotates about one thing that is really the gear of this delegation, is finance. Mm-hmm. We need the finance, we need the knowledge, and we need the technical capacity to get it there. Thank you.
A big round of applause to our panelists. I don't think this we find very often. Again, water connects us all. It connects all sectors, all generations. This is important. I mean, I do teach negotiation also, university, and this is an incredible case study on negotiations, multi-party negotiations. Maybe we will need one ministry to be here, one World Bank to be here, maybe next time that we organize this. But we need to keep these initiatives going. We need to keep these conversations going. I mean, I've been hearing a lot from the panel, and then I'm going to hear a lot from all of you, hopefully. I've been hearing finance. I mean, the topic of this COP. Most likely, we're not going to reach an agreement. It's very unfortunate because finance, I mean, it's the continuation of all the best practices that young people and our former generations are bringing. We talked about the energy that young people can bring to the table. I mean, come on, have you seen us? Have you seen how many numbers we hire? Have you seen us protesting outside? Have you seen us trying to get agendas on the table? And again, we need to be provided the spaces to be able to make this change. And this is why we are being included again at this conversation on how to build this water and food nexus. And hopefully we see many more of you within your own perspectives, within your own communities, within your own regions, getting in whatever of these sectors you like and start making change in this way. We have been talking about research, the importance of research, the importance of free research as well, where you can decide what kind of approaches you want to implement because you know best, and you know your topic best, and you know the communities you're going to be working with best, hopefully, or you give yourself the resources to get to know them. We're talking about visibility. We should not silence voices. We should not silence wisdom and knowledge. And I'm very happy that in Cali, in Colombia, we did recognize indigenous people and indigenous knowledges as the safeguarders of our earth, and finally was there, because we have been known within civil society for ages. But again, there's a lot of work to be done in that regard in a lot of places. We have been talking about federations. We have been talking about bringing voices from people who are not being able to be invited at COP to be represented. Thank you again for all the work that you're doing, because I know that you have a lot of responsibilities on your shoulders to represent so many voices. We're talking about consumption. We're talking about restoration, one of the big pillars as well. Like, how do we restore? How do we change behaviors as well? Again, different generations, different behaviors, but at the end of the day, we see that the trends are not changing that much. We talked about undernutrition, malnutrition. Inequalities, they start even before we are born. And we need water and we need food to survive. That's a fact for everyone. No one, no matter how rich or how poor you are, no one can escape this reality that is the reality of life. We have echo chambers, we have silos, and this is why we need to, it's good to talk to ourselves, it's good to have our own different safe spaces, but at the end of the day, we need to talk to each other, because if not, we're not going to make solutions that last, as I said before. We need, again, we have observed that water and climate patterns are changing. Are they changing fast enough? I'm not sure. And again, it's very beautiful to see that here we all seem to agree on the basics, but then sometimes we might not agree on what priorities need to be put at the forefront. And this is why we are here as well, to ask difficult questions, perhaps, and see what potential ways of further communication we can have. We have innovation, the co-creation of knowledge, the importance of not reinventing the wheel. This is something that tends to be very flashy. When we are like, oh, I created my own organization, I did my own initiative, and I myself brought change to the entire planet. But normally, we get inspired from learning stories of people who were there before us, who fought the fights that we were fighting and that we are fighting before us. And again, the beauty of art, the beauty of getting not only our head involved, but also our heart involved, and hopefully our hands, so to give this knowledge to other people, to transmit everything we know, and to try to also finance everything we know. And with that, I would like to go back to the Mentimeter, because we have some burning questions. Hopefully the Mentimeter is still there. Perfect. So now what I would like to ask you, if there's people from the audience who asked a couple of these questions, or who would still like to ask another question that is related to this, especially if it's burning, especially if it's a little bit challenging to our speakers, especially if it shows, okay, this is very pretty, but what about this? Have you thought about this? What about this other priority? How do we bridge these other gaps that we're not taking into account, because at the end of the day, we don't see enough action taken right now? Please feel free to share. I will give you the mic very happily, and then I will let, in one sentence, maybe two, the speakers to reply. Does that sound like a plan for you? Yes? Perfect. Who's starting? No. We need a bit of energy. Yes. Girl Scouts movement.
Hello, namaste. Myself Sharmil. I'm from WAX, World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So my question for you all is, how climate education, especially climate curriculum, can bring in the change in community? So there are no lots of climate curriculum in education till yet. There are some curriculum, the mixture of that curriculum related to climate action, but we don't have specific climate curriculum where we can focus on sustainability, water, sanitation, and forest. So about this, that's it.
Education, access to education, and then what is being taught. Who gives more? Who gives another question? We are here, this is our opportunity, and then we're going to be bringing this to other dialogues that we're going to be hosting. If not, I will go back directly to the ones that we have on the Mentimeter. Perfect. I know that I always need to give 5 seconds.
Okay, I'm Juanita from Liberia, representing WAX, the World Association for Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So we are out here representing 10 million girls around the world in 152 countries. So my question is, what policies are in place to address water sanitation issues, particularly those affecting women and girls?
Women and girls. Important. This we saw in the Mentimeter before that we did. The importance of having everyone included, and especially the most vulnerable communities, among which children and women. Any other person wishing to share their question? To take the floor, to take the space. Okay, I have looked enough in the eyes of people to know that this is not going to come unless I start asking all of the questions. Let me pick. How do we ensure that sanitation facilities are accessible and safe for women and girls? This is again related to the question that was just asked. It's about safety. It's about ensuring that we don't have that many trade-offs where we have access to food and water. We talked before about greed. So how do we navigate greed, and how do we navigate difficult boards and board meetings and difficult priorities? How do we integrate local actors? I hope that you're taking mental note, because this is going to go back to you. And then how do we make sure that agriculture is precise? I don't know who asked that question. I would love for you to expand a little bit more on this. If not, we'll take it as such. And then how do we ensure rights, control over, and access to water by small-scale and peasant farming communities? How do we prevent them from being grabbed from big corporations? And what's the trade-off? To what extent do we need these big corporations to be there? To what extent we don't want to be there, and how do we keep them away? How do we allow them to have sustainable practices? How can we shift from socio-political to economic, eco-regional focus water management plans? How do we adapt to the contexts? How do we make sure that we have something that makes sense for the people who are needing it? And then policies. What policies already exist? Because again, sometimes we don't even mention water. Sometimes we don't even mention food. And sometimes we take it too much for granted. So now, last opportunity. Okay, so we're going to go back to our panel. And I'm going to give you 5 sentences to address all of these points, and perhaps inspire a little bit with one last extra 6 sentence our audience on why they should join your sector to make a change when it comes to the water and food nexus. We can start with you. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't give a statement that can please anyone to come to my sector, but because we all know agriculture is food, and production is quite tricky, but handsome too, because we have to produce for the increase in population. So when we talk about, I think the only question I can address is precision agriculture. Like I said earlier, it's the young people that are trying to produce more, but using less water. And of recent, we have seen an increasing system called hydroponics, how people are trying to produce, especially pastures using the hydroponics. So some of the technologies that can still be used. But also we have an increase in seeds of biotechnology that uses quite less amount of water. But also we have seen an increased amount of hybrids that take shorter period of times to grow, so that we can utilize lesser amount of water in a shorter period of times. So that is, all of that goes into precision agriculture. How best can we produce but using less? But also the increase in technology. We have seen soil sensors coming into play, that we only irrigate when we need to irrigate. We have also seen drip line irrigations coming into play instead of using the flooding technologies that used to happen. So these are type of technologies that are coming up, but also trying to be used by young farmers. Also, I think it's now the new technology being used. Back in the days, it was quite hard to cite water, because we used to use the old methods, but now using technology, we're trying easy to cite water and then drill it quite so often, and we use it. So I think that's what I can say about precision agriculture. How can we protect our water reserves so that they are not taken away by the big companies? I think we need to create a win-win situation, but also creating awareness to the farmers. The federations or the farmer structures need to be put onto the drawing boards or onto the discussion tables where these decisions are being made. Oftentimes, we see policies being drafted, and we only get to hear that the policies have been signed. The perspective of the farmers or the smallholder farmers are not represented, and that is where most of the problems actually start from. So we need to create ownership of whatever is going to happen by the farmers themselves. So engage them by their farmer structures or the farm organization, so that they can put their voice onto whatever is being created. And then maybe, a big maybe, we could try to influence whatever is trying to happen. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for all of this work.
So I'll add on the issue of how do we control water and make sure small-scale farmers have access to it and it's not controlled by big corporates. Whether we take it or not, let's just be honest, corruption is at the top of that. It's more of the government striking that balance, because who is giving power to these big companies? If we are honest, it's the government, you know? Nobody's going to be there to speak on behalf of small-scale farmers, even if now they rise, if the government is not being, is not giving that ear to listen. Another thing is when I say striking a balance, is more speaking of who is more vulnerable in such situations. We have cases where there's extreme water scarcity, but water is now there's a battle between the farmers and the cities. Who needs that access, Who should be given that privilege of having access to water? Let me remove this. It's more of now looking at what is more important at that time. Is it either production or making sure that we have enough to facilitate for activities in the cities, that's infrastructures and other stuffs. And now speaking of girls and women, what policies are there and affecting women and girls, and how are making sure sanitation is accessible. I'll be honest with you, when we wait for policies to really work, that's going to take time. Because policies have been there. The hard part comes into how do we transform them from words to action. And that has been the struggle for generations. One thing that I can share is what we've been doing in Tanzania is we've been working in the Maasai communities very closely, which is one of the indigenous communities in my country, making sure that young girls have access to water. It's so hard to the point that we barely have washrooms imagine, washroom in a school for girls to be able to cater for their needs, And saying the policies are not there is a lie, because they're there, but the issue is still very much existing. One thing that we've been doing is involving the communities directly, and that means tribal leaders. I don't know how do you call them, the cultural community leaders, as well as young people and corporate as well, in making sure that we fundraise and kind of involve our leaders in a sense that we bring them on ground to see what is happening within these communities. But also when we fundraise, we do not give them back to the government to be like, hey, this is how much we fundraise, or give them to the corporate and be like, hey, this is how much we've fundraised, help us build the washrooms or whatever the case, but more of letting the communities take lead of what they feel they need. That means the communities of local Maasai women building toilets for their young girls in schools. That has been something that has worked for our community, building with the community, making sure they have ownership of everything that we are building. We have the solution, yes, but we give them ownership. We let them take lead and take charge of it. And they do it in a way that honestly works best for them, because nobody can understand their pain better than themselves. And that has been something that works. In terms of policy, I am a big advocate of it, but it will take probably 20 years for something that can be done in 6 months. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm going to do the same and take this off. I think to start from the top, I really want to honor you, incredible three young women here who, to be part of a grassroots group, to come up into the face of adversity in these rooms. I don't have much experience on sanitation, but I think hearing is what I can provide, is that we all might be on the front lines of crises, but we also at the forefront of the change. And so education being a gap, it's about, how do we build the capacity that it brings our knowledges and we share it our way, that we know where these solutions are grounded in our community. And so bringing back in fundraising is, how do we advocate for more fundraising to be able to support you for the resources that for you to create, to share with your community, because you are the trusted voice for your community. And I think that sort of interlinks with sort of policies, agree. They are slow, especially with bureaucracy. but we need champions inside those spaces, but also pressure outside from civil society and NGOs. And we talked about it, this goes back to, it's one to have young people at the seat of the table, but we also need to have young people being decision makers and co-designing these, because we are inheriting these responsibilities. It's not in the future, it is now, as we mentioned earlier. And I think just for agriculture for large and small scale, in regards to, their roles in like water accessibility and sustainability, I was on a panel with Sunrise Group in Australia a few weeks ago before I came here. And they were. Brad mentioned how dry and arid our land is in Australia, and we have a lot of fracking is something that our country has really invested in over our communities, and so it's actually about working with small scale farmers and using traditional and indigenous knowledge about what was robust to our land. How do we bring that back into our land and that foreground that knowledge as the solution? Because we've been caring and looking after country for millennia and living with this land, and so it's important to use those systems and mechanisms within those solutions. We shouldn't be like Sunrise Group were like, oh, we can be sustainable by using less water. I was like, that's not even, rice doesn't even grow here on our lands. That's why we traded with our other relatives across the ocean. So how do we use food systems back into that were robust into our communities? And so that's where small scale farming is really pivotal. Australia, the agriculture sector in Australia pollutes 17% of our emissions. And so the more that we can reduce that and work together with small scale farmers, the more that we can also create that circular economy. And it comes back to my brother here, is that there's a physical side and the economy side. And so what does sustainability look like? And I just quickly, it's that, again, agreeing with regional and rural and remote equity versus urban areas and who we're accountable to.
Well, thank you. I will try to also support some of the questions of education. Someone that has been basically leading one of the few programs we have in our university related to climate change and sustainability. It has been interesting to see that even in professional or people that are getting into a professional degree in environment get astonished by the topics and how engaged they get also into start working on that. So from that, we have resulted in that many of the people around the delegation actually are alumni from this program and get into the topics or interest in the topic because of the reformations we did in the university. And this is something that we are also really keen to work in different educational levels, because at university level, I think we are already a bit too late. We have to start as soon as possible, and there are different ways to engage into those. I am a big believer of science and society and how we can build science together, not only from the traditional science perspective, but also, as Bradley really mentioned, trying to integrate this traditional knowledge and what are the current activities and explain them into science terms. And it's amazing how the communities, the children, we have experience in that too, have evolved into that. So there's a different view after getting the inside or the technical knowledge, but I think the most important thing is to engage in a very personal level, like what change in temperature means for me and for my community, and how I can translate that into actions, and how can I translate that into pushing policy, and how can I translate that into mobilizing, I don't know, maybe just creating a federation and organize ourselves and listen to each other more to find solutions. So that's a big part, and we are never too late or too young to learn. And so I'm constantly learning also from my students, and many of them, because of this engagement with the topics have even created NGOs and engaged in more research projects with specific topics related to advance this. Something that also can bring a little perspective of from the little experience I have. It's research has to be very multifacetical, multidisciplinary to advance in these topics. It's not easy task to do water management, not easy task to do food production, and especially as complex that have become our scenarios everywhere, we definitely need more perspectives in this to try to find suitable solutions that are sustainable in time. So whether we are in fields of law, politics, health, or even culture and arts, we need everyone's perspectives into this to try to find the solutions that are sustainable.
Wow. I mean, I agree with everything that you said, and it's very similar to some of the things I was going to talk about, and it's primarily on the water education question, where that this is a perfect example of not having to reinvent the wheel. Rather than trying to figure out how to educate our communities, there are numerous educational programs and pamphlets out there that educate specifically on water and food and health, but we should rather look at what voices are not included in these educational programs. And in the US, I actually helped grow this organization called 0 Hour, where we wrote a platform specifically on the intersectionality of the climate crisis. But what we focused on is bridging like the research with case studies of populations that are directly affected about what we're educating people on. So for example, we included the indigenous community, we included farmers, we included various young people, specifically women on the front line, prisoners on the front line of natural disasters, voices that weren't necessarily usually highlighted in these educational programs. And that's what we should be prioritizing, especially amid the increasing resources and accessibility that we're coming into. And coming from an academic background, and especially a big institution that prides itself on its innovative research, there's a huge disconnect between the pipeline of research actually translating into action and that research actually updating the advocacy points of young people or people that are on the negotiation tables. And I think we need to do a better job at pressuring institutions, especially research institutions, to ensure that the research actually comes into fruition, or at least is done in partnership with communities that are already, or the communities themselves that are being studied by these institutions. I think that is a huge point of privilege, and we should definitely put more accountability on institutions. And on the point of accountability, I definitely, like working in hospitals, I'm very biased, but we need to pressure systems that are basically just increasing the water vulnerability in food systems, because they are playing into the part of ordering from these big corporations, and rather pressure them to form partnerships with local farmers. Because in order to really make the vision that we're all talking about happen, we need to empower the people that we keep advocating for, and empowering usually comes from a terms of a finance lens, and that's when we can basically hold accountable these big systems to ensure that they're actually funding and ordering from these local farmers to ensure that our vision comes into fruition. And I guess my last point is, I agree with everyone saying that the solutions are out there, especially low-cost sustainable solutions, but just ensuring that they do get into the hands of the communities that we're advocating for. So thank you.
Yes. Let's try to keep it to 2 minutes, because we're almost done with time. But please continue.
Sure. Thank you for these great talks, great points. I fully agree with what has been said. I feel that on knowledge management, capacity building, we really need to include local actors and empower them. I wanted to share with you a project we've been working on for 20 years now, creating a master on water sanitation and hygiene in Burkina Faso. And this master is, this training program is now fully autonomous, and we are trying to, so that's huge accomplishment to be autonomous on financial aspects, and we are now trying to do the same in Jordan and trying to replicate this kind of training programs, masters and other training, because we have seen such great outcomes. Now we have seen many of the students who graduated from this program in positions in international NGOs, in UN positions as well. So we have seen these great outcomes, and I feel that. And what we are lacking now is funding to create. To create other training programs. So it goes back to funding and to how we manage to finance these training programs. Also on young people and decision makers, I just wanted to come back on that a very important point, and the fact that yes, indeed, we need to have young people at the strategic position, and local actors at this included in these strategic decisions. So when we are talking about partnerships, it's not only it's strategic partnerships, and this is key. So yeah, I wanted to emphasize on that. My last point would be about research and action, coming back to what you mentioned. We are also talking about a huge issue on that matter, that is funding again, and finding. I'm just opening another question here, that is how do we manage to find these fundings? Yeah.
Thanks. So I want to tackle the topic of partnerships. So climate change is the biggest challenge we have as a human mankind, and this challenge cannot be solved alone. So we need partnerships. We need partnerships with our suppliers, with our customers, with our peers, with politics. And that's why I don't want to talk about we need big companies, small companies. We need innovation. So we need quick innovation. And I want to end this panel with a positive example that there are solutions. For example, with direct seeded rice, we try to bring in the market direct seeded rice with multiple benefits. You need less water, which means you need less seedlings, because usually you have to grow the seedlings in a nursery. But with less water, you also need less seedlings because more survive. People don't have to stand in the water, which is flooded on the rice fields. You can use machinery then, what is more efficient to work there. And for sure, less water leaves less methane emissions, and that's what we all are talking about here. So there are solutions which help us to produce more, so to have more productivity, more income for the farmers, and restore more. And let's share also these positive examples and other examples to the world.
I want to try and tackle 3 in 120 seconds. See how we go. The curricular stuff is important, and I think it needs to start from a young age. So from junior school to mid-school to high school to university, so all the way it needs to happen. So my university has an Indigenous graduate attribute, so everyone gets a taste of Indigenous knowledge throughout, especially in the sciences. But it's across law and health and all the other schools as well, so that's cool. I've also been part of a group of Indigenous scholars that's created curricula that is bound around Indigenous knowledge, so for water, astronomy and fire. So 3 big ones for us. And so an example of knowledge is recently, so if you go through the corridor of animals, the photos of animals, so there's the Australian emu, we call him Dinawan. So Dinawan, we gather his eggs, which are like similar to ostrich eggs. They're quite large eggs, so a beautiful big omelette. They breed usually in the winter months, and that's normal, and that relates to the dark matter in the Milky Way in the sky. And so the dark matter actually changes, and that actually reflects on when you collect those eggs. And so we've been under La Nina, so we've had wet periods in Australia for the last 3 years. So we're seeing the emu breed twice, and the elders are noticing that. So knowledge and observation has seen that rather than science and ecology, you know. So that is being taught in our curricula. The one around water and sanitary hygiene for us in Australia, I've been part of a number of reports looking at remote Aboriginal communities that don't have access to clean, healthy water. It's a basic human right, even though we're a modern country, we're a rich country. And so there's communities that have natural uranium, high phosphates, high nitrogen, high E. coli in their water systems. And so I suppose we don't get the voice or recognition. So when you think about Sustainable Development Goal 6, you know, we would fail as a country if it was reported correctly. An example is where my grandmother grew up. So this is in the she was there in the 1930s. And so in the early 2000s, the preschool, so these are under 4-year-olds, they didn't have clean drinking water. They had high phosphates and also pesticides in their water system because it was coming from groundwater. And an Indian not-for-profit come out to Australia and installed a system. So we're a modern country, rich country, and we had a not-for-profit come out from India and install a UV water treatment system. So that's what we're dealing with in Australia. No one knows our story. We're just a little island in the middle of the Pacific that everyone forgets, sadly. So I suppose it's great to be here to give our story. The other one around policy, and I think my other challenge in life is to develop science, evidence that can actually influence policy, because you don't get change in policy without evidence. And it's hard coming from an Indigenous point of view, that we need to make sure that Indigenous knowledge is part of that evidence, and we can actually influence policy that can then influence legislation that can change decisions and perceptions. So that's my challenge in the world. And if you want to hear some of the world's oldest water stories, come and study at University of Technology in Sydney.
Hi. I wanted to share some challenging or hopefully challenging ideas. One is insist in these different realities in different parts. So in Spain, we have the experience that using less water to producing more has resulted in using more water. How is that done? Because farmers find with the same water they were using, they can crop more area, and they are producing more. And then they extend the area used. Then they use a little more water, and that's spread, and we are having these problems. Some other climate change is changing reality. So some of these climate that farmers were used a long time are changing, and that's a big challenge. But still we can recover this indigenous or ancient knowledge, because there have been different climate risks a long time. So we can still use all practices that have been used along life. And coming to the increase in production in Spain, like in Europe and US and some other countries, they are producing even too much food, and they need to export it to other countries. So here come the international markets, which is again a big challenge, and which is a big barrier to some other countries to develop. This can be connected with colonial stories as well. And I think that's a big barrier that we have to think to have in our mind. I have been working in research in Mozambique. The whole country has the same budget for public policies that has my city region, Madrid. We are 3.5 million. Mozambique is 40 million. We have the same budget to cover all policies. Then here we come to the challenge of how do we translate the policies into practice in implementation. If we don't have the resources, it's really difficult, impossible, or then that's why it takes 10 years. So that's another thing. And finally, one more, I don't know. My final thought is the importance of participation, of participation of everybody, all people, all stakeholders involved, especially farmers, of course, but also technology companies, the government, NGOs, and everybody interested should be involved. Well, at least in Spain, we don't have the tradition of doing this, so it's always a challenge. We have to insist on this. It doesn't mean always a high expenditure, a high budget is necessary, but it's just, I think, a change in perspective to try to bring all the voices together.
And that's actually a big round of applause, please, for our speakers. That's a very, very interesting way to end the panel today, because I've personally worked in participatory democracy, so for participation and science policy interface. I train researchers how to communicate with policymakers and engage in policy spaces in Switzerland and Europe, and also for these international events. And I think what we can take, or at least what I'm taking out of this panel, first of all, wow, thank you so much for giving your time. Again, we know that time is precious, and that your activism and that your conversations are very precious as well. I think what I would like to emphasize is that it's important to be in insiders. It's important to be and to bring our messages to all of the sectors that we can. To not give up. This world can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, more times than not. There's best practices, so always go back to the best practices when you can, because that's going to allow us to have a long, fruitful career. Hopefully the world is still here in a couple of years and we still have water and we still have food within the sector. But also to dare to stand up against what is not right and for what is right. To dare speaking up for having language adapted, for having communication methods in order for communication to exist. Because at the end of the day, we can stay in our silos, but then it's great. We will use our own acronyms. We will be like, oh, we're so great, but then we will not be making change because we're not talking to each other and we're not actually understanding what the other needs. To stand up against bureaucracy, against fracking, against the money not reaching the people it was originally intended to. Dare to open the hand to some of the programs that we have been investing our lives to, but we know they cannot be continued, or they should be given up to other communities for them to take over, or to other generations for them to take over. To dare speaking about accountability and KPIs and monitoring our projects. We all have the best intentions sometimes when we start our projects, but we know that we need feedback, and we know that we need to keep tracking the progress that is being made, and perhaps sometimes we need to reorient. To dare connect topics that before were not that much connected. Water and food is one example. We need more conversations like this. And I think as well, it's important for us to notice that for what for us is obvious, might not be for others. And never forget that for some people, there's no alternatives. We do not provide certain alternatives to certain people that then we judge. And that is not fair, because we need to dare again to create a world where everyone can stand up for what is right. And again, when it comes to climate change, we all know that it will affect our families, it will affect our communities, it will affect our loved ones, no matter where we are. Like, I come from Valencia, I was born and raised in Valencia, Spain, and we know what happened. We know the massive deadly floods that were going on there. So again, it's about finding win-win solutions, as was previously mentioned. It's about getting inspired from what others are doing and facilitating these spaces, but also it's finding a communication that is strong enough to find a best alternative to a non-negotiated agreement, because sometimes win-win might not happen. Thank you so much for coming here, and I will ask our panel also to take a picture later. May I ask you for a picture, please?